million in sales. First flop of the season.
I need to get you and the boy away from here.
King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. It's debuted in third place with a measly $14 million. It cost $175 million to make. Snatched is second for the week. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS News.
More states letting kids use sunscreen at school without a doctor's note. Arizona, Washington, Utah, the latest to enact laws freeing students to bring sunscreen to school without any special paperwork involved. Similar legislation is moving forward this spring in Rhode Island and Louisiana and Florida. Parents concerned about sun overexposure leading to skin cancer. They support the measures, but others voice concerns because some kids are allergic to those lotions. I'm Jim Taylor, CBS News.
It must be, it has to be, with that big sound it's gotta be KSCO.
From San Jose to Salinas, Red Hot News Talk, AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz.
Good afternoon, you're listening to KSCO Santa Cruz, AM 1080, FM 1041, and now serving San Jose on 1079 FM. Welcome to our new listeners. It's 4:06 on a beautiful Sunday, Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day, y'all. We'll get a look at your weather and traffic. Highway 1, north to Santa Cruz below the limit at 41st Avenue, although that is a brief slowdown. What's really killing right now is 17 northbound, backed up from Scotts Valley all the way to the Summit, southbound heavy between the Reservoir and Idlewild. A couple accidents there too. Looks like 3 in the northbound just past Summit and 1 in the southbound right there. And before you get to the Summit, you'll definitely need plenty of extra time over 17. If you can avoid it, you'll be better off. Highway 101, heavy northbound from the 156 to Highway 25. 152, 129, 156, 183, good for the most part. 68 wide open. If you can actually avoid 156, especially toward Prunedale, I would recommend Blackie Road. Clear skies tonight, a few passing clouds, a low near 49 degrees. Tomorrow sunny in the afternoon. High winds through today, tonight, and tomorrow, and a small craft advisory in effect through tomorrow night. 4:07, time for Veterans Take Charge with your hosts, Justin Baker and Dave Ramos. We are also streaming on YouTube at KSCO Global. Check it out.
Happy Mother's Day to Marsha Ramos and Marlene Baker. Happy Mother's Day to all mothers of veterans around the world. Happy Mother's Day to veterans and active duty service members who are downrange right now. A very special Happy Mother's Day to all of our Blue Star moms with family members downrange right now. And a very heartfelt Happy Mother's Day to all of our Gold Star mothers whose children have given the ultimate sacrifice to our country. Collectively, we all know the world in a manner of perspective that only experience can shape. Keep that in mind. Are we acting as the model or the example that we want to show the world? Keep that in mind as well. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Veterans Take Charge radio show.
Welcome to the Veterans Take Charge radio show, a show dedicated to all of our country's warfighters, past, present, and beyond, actively bridging the gap between civilian counterparts and fighting for a better America, while sharing and promoting the strength of our active duty and veteran community nationwide. Last week on Veterans Take Charge, our guest hosts were Lisa DeKoch and Aaron McFarland of Operation LOV, Love Our Veterans. It was high speed, low drag, and absolutely intentional. We ran through our initial impressions of the bill HR 1628, the new health care bill. President Trump's own words, he killed Obamacare. So I guess he's rewriting it. We're gonna figure that one out. It's gonna take a minute because it's probably a lot of literature to read. The new healthcare bill has the potential to impact all Americans in a lot of different ways, none of which seem like a good idea at first glance. Some of them seem like an alright idea to me, but not to Dave. Not the biggest Trump supporter. With the help of our guests, we talked about some of the prominent features that are shaping the document and the new American Healthcare Act. The frustration is real, but hope is not lost. Never lost amongst the veterans. During hour 2, we took a short Hunt the Good Stuff segment with Lisa DeKoch and Aaron McFarland to hear about their very well-earned new opportunities in Oregon. Hopefully they'll reopen the nonprofit Operation Love Our Vets up there in the northern state, and they can help veterans where they're relocating. Either way, though, I got a delivery from OpLove in Santa Cruz this week, so I know they're still functioning here.
Nice.
And trying to support veterans here in the community. They're doing great things constantly. So we had the conversation with them, and it was a fantastic broadcast last week, pretty impactful. I know Aaron and Lisa and everyone in studio had a really good time together. It was a lot of laughs, a little bit of heat. I dropped an F-bomb on air by accident because I was excited. And this week's show, Veterans Take Charge, is excited to bring you Major Joshua Mance. He's in studio with us today. He's our guest host. Major Mance was hit by sniper fire in Baghdad in 2007. He was clinically dead for 15 minutes and was brought back to life by a fantastic medical team. Today he's going to tell his story, how they saved him. Major Mance will explain why our psychological trauma treatment might be missing a few pieces that they need to add in, and how we can get to the root cause of your trauma issues. He has answers for all of us today. So we'll discuss life, death, and life after death. You don't want to miss today's extraordinary broadcast. And hopefully we can teach you how to teach others around you how to cope with traumas that they may be facing. So welcome to Veterans Take Charge.
I like it.
Dave.
Like it.
Fire away.
Hey, Major Mance, I'm going to give you a high five, man.
Hey, man. Happy to be here.
Thank you very
Beautiful
much for
day
being
in Santa
here.
Cruz.
Right, it really is.
You want to give your mom a shout out?
Oh, definitely. My mom, Michelle, is living in Pennsylvania right now, so happy Mother's Day, Mom.
Good son.
Hey, before we drive on any further, I want to talk a little bit about Language Day. Now, Major Mance, you were in the Presidio Monterey. That's where you got out of the military from.
That was my last duty station.
Did you ever go to Language Day?
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
What was your initial impression when you first heard about and thought?
You know, a lot of the people that go to DLI have a pretty high level of cultural competence, right? To begin with, they're of that mindset going into it, and I think it's just the demonstration of what that day is in terms of cultural competence and what all cultures from the world can bring to us is just fantastic. What they do there, it's definitely a melting pot down there at DLI.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm always impressed by the presentation that that goes on over there. I've been to Language Day a couple of times, and it's always something new. It's always something different. And this past, 2 weeks ago, we had the Garrison Post Commander, Colonel Brown, and Tony Verretta, an Army Ranger, who was the MC of one of the special presentations on the radio show, talked all about culture, about Language Day, the importance of I don't know about cultural appropriation, but cultural awareness. Right. You know what I'm saying? And that was an awesome, awesome broadcast. And on Friday, they hit the ball out of the park. It was awesome. So if you go to facebook.com/KSEO Vets, you see a couple of pictures and some videos of the celebration itself. There were tons of people. And oh man, the food. Oh, the food. I had some lamb shawarma. I don't know what
From
lamb
every corner of the world.
Shawarma is delicious.
Oh, yes, it is.
I think
found
that's
this
a
out.
Syrian dish, right?
Sure.
Middle Eastern for sure. Yeah.
I didn't dive too far into that culture, not as far as my mouth. It was awesome. And so Colonel Brown and Tony went up and they did the commencement ceremony for the Vietnam veterans. There was upwards of, I think, 60 Vietnam veterans that were identified, brought up on stage, and we got to know what their rank was, what their branch was, and they all received identification pins, recognition, not identification. They got pins, and it was awesome. It was very, very awesome. A very good ceremony, a heartfelt ceremony. Tony was a speaker, Colonel Brown was a speaker, and a Vietnam veteran, Jack Stewart, was another special speaker, and Jack laid it out. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little real. It was kind of grim. but it was real. People need to hear that kind of stuff, because when we hear about Vietnam, or when I think about Vietnam from my standpoint, being in this generation, I don't know what it was like. So I know what I've heard. I know what people told me. I know what I've seen in school books and on TV and whatnot. But hearing it from the horse's mouth, people that were there, what it was like, it was like a punch in the gut. It was like a punch in the gut. And I think people really did need to hear that. He talked about exactly how many casualties were lost per branch of service. He talked about the realities of being there, how he's here. And it's giving me chills thinking about it. He was starting to get choked up. I was starting to get choked up. Anyway, go to facebook.com/KSCO Vets. Look up the Veterans Take Charge Radio Show on Facebook, and you can watch all of that. There was I caught some live streaming footage of Vietnam cultural dance, and it was great. It was really cool.
Great stuff.
Yeah. So, let's talk about now. Let's talk about today. Joshua Mance. Let's talk about you, man.
What are you doing?
So you're from Pennsylvania. You went
Sure
to
am.
West Point, and you graduated from West Point. You went to infantry as an officer.
Yep.
Why? What are some of the reasons why you joined the military? Do you have like a military family, any kind of influence or anything?
Man, I was locked on going to West Point probably by the time I was 12.
Oh, really? Was that
yeah.
one of your decisions, or?
I remember being a little kid, and I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be a student, and I wanted to go in the military. And that's when my
damn good
stepfather,
combination.
my stepfather, who was a police officer, and prior to that, a military officer, infantry guy for about 6 years.
Nice.
That's when he kind of planted the seed in my mind. You can go to West Point and do all three of those. So, and from the time I was 12, I was laser focused on that until the day I set foot in the academy. So.
That's awesome. We're like, when I was telling my buddies I was going to join the military, they all like pointed and laughed at me. Of course, my friends are freaking burnouts, but whatever. I love you guys. But they didn't have a very good reception to it. They're like,
Right.
You're really? So knowing that from a young age that this is something that you wanted to do, at certain points in your life, were friends really supportive or not supportive?
Everyone was supportive.
Awesome.
And I don't think it came as a surprise to anyone, right? I was part of the junior ROTC program in our high school. And, my freshman year, we had a guy named Doug Vanderpool, Sergeant Major retired, Doug Vanderpool. He was a Special Forces Sergeant Major in 7th Group.
That guy sounds scary already.
The guy literally had this legendary career in the Special Forces, and then retired and came to this small town in Pennsylvania and took over a junior ROTC program. So this is the guy that would be landing Chinook helicopters in the football field, taking the cadets off to FTXs. And we would have,
That sounds awesome.
It was amazing. I mean, we'd have college ROTCs hopping onto our training, right?
Sounds so rad.
Because they couldn't do it, right? So we had, we'd go out and do day and night land nav, rappelling, obstacle courses, all that stuff. But everything, though, more than anything else, it was grounded in community, and service to other people. And as you talk about cultural competence and language day, Doug was one of the biggest influences in my life. He knew I was going down the military path, and it was him who really started to drive in the humility of respecting foreign cultures for their capability. They might not be the most technologically advanced, but they have every bit of the drive and dedication that our soldiers do, and our people do. So, reinforcing, cultural competence started for me back then. And
Nice.
He reinforced the importance of language. He reinforced this. So, when I got to the academy, that's why I made the call to major in Arabic while I was there. And
Nice.
I think language, even when I was downrange lander, language is the most powerful weapon that I could have carried.
Communication, straight up.
How impactful was it for you having a mentor like him at that young of an age? I mean, did that just solidify the fact that you were definitely going in? I know you were already on the path, but working with someone like that as a kid, my best friend's dad was a long-range recon ranger in Vietnam, and one of my PE teachers was the ex-Special Forces in middle school.
What?
So,
Who?
yeah, Mr. Ponzi, Steve Ponzi. And I know I always looked up to them. I mean, For you, was having him as a mentor, did that just kind of solidify your path?
It sure did. I mean, two people that really shaped my life at that age was Doug and my stepfather. You know, both of whom had military backgrounds. Several other people in my life had military backgrounds as well, and I grew up in a family of police. So it was that was really my my path growing up. But I latched onto every word those guys said.
Exactly.
You know, and it was stuff that wasn't necessarily mainstream. You know, people think special forces and special operations are all about direct action and conducting raids and I mean, certainly that's part of that. They're the best at what they do when it comes to that stuff, but the much larger component is their ability to build relationships, their ability to inspire people, right? And those are the kind of things that were ingrained with me as a kid that I was able to directly apply when I got to Baghdad just a couple years later.
You know, that stuff, yeah, absolutely. That stuff is very important. That's something that I really want to keep in the forefront, is that the military, you know, special forces, military in general, is not all like smash and grab, break things and light things on fire. You know, there really is the necessity to build relationships across the globe. Because if, you know, there's this global stage that's looking freaking haywire, but if we make friends on the other side of the fence, you know, we could avoid massive catastrophe.
Right on.
You know,
Can't do it alone.
we can't. One team, one fight. That's something else I was thinking about with the police. One team, one fight. You know what I'm saying?
This is Veterans Take Charge Radio Show. We're going to take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Hi, registered pharmacist Ben Fuchs here. I've been studying healthy bodies for 35 years, and what I've got to tell you may shock and surprise you, but if you listen up, it may change your life. Our world is lit and energized from the light released from the sun in the form of waves, two of which are known as UVA and UVB, and are invisible and associated with the aging, dangerous, and sometimes deadly effects conventionally attributed to solar radiation. UVA waves are linked to damage in the lower levels of the skin and can show up as wrinkles, fine lines, and other indicators of photo damage. Solar rays of UVA length can penetrate through glass windows and remain constant all year long, making them a troublesome source of skin aging January through December. The other solar wave, UVB, is the cause of sunburning, skin redness, and eye damage. On a positive note, UVB is responsible for converting cholesterol, found in considerable quantities in the skin, into vitamin D. Most chemical sunscreening ingredients block UVB, a couple will block UVA, but the only way to get truly broad-spectrum sun protection from all rays is to use zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, which act to reflect all the sun rays, including UVA and UVB, refracting them in their crystalline structure like a reflection in a mirror. And as far as overall sun safety goes, don't be misled by SPF, which is only an indicator of UVB protection and provides no information about shielding from UVA. That means that SPF is only a measurement of how well a product can help prevent sunburns and not an indicator of protection from wrinkles, skin aging, or cancer. Pharmacist Ben here, urging you to go to kscohealth.com to order Beyond Tangy Tangerine, the Healthy Start Pack, and other nutritional supplements that I personally use and recommend. You can purchase these premium quality products at wholesale prices online at kscohealth.com. That's kscohealth.com. I'm the pharmacist that believes that staying healthy and strong is not only about medicine, it's about giving your body the raw materials it needs to do its work. Go to kscohealth.com. Make sure you check out the cool videos too at kscohealth.com. That's kscohealth.com.
This is the Veterans Take Charge Radio Show this Sunday and every Sunday from 14 to 1600 on AM 1080 KSCO. We're in studio with former Army Major Joshua Montz. Thanks again, man.
Of course, yeah. Love being here. Great stuff.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So when did you join the military?
That was back in 2005. I graduated from the academy and went to Fort Benning for a year of infantry training. So
nice. So you graduated from the academy in 2005. When did you start? This is West Point Academy, right?
Yes. That's
when did
correct,
you start West Point?
2001. So really, the way right after you graduate high school, the next month you're hopping on that train and get off 4 years later. So.
So in 2001, I mean, the first thing that pops into my mind is something I love asking everybody is like, where were you on September 11th, 2001? Yeah. It's always an interesting story. It's always good in my mind to get the experience and like what it meant, because for a lot of us, especially this generation, a lot of us, that's what was the main call to action.
Right.
That's what changed the world, really. Right. So where were you September 11th?
I was a freshman at the academy sitting in psychology class that morning when it came on the television. We actually turned the TVs off pretty quickly. West Point's very mission focused, mission oriented.
Minimize
distractions. So our I mean, obviously we were very tuned into it from that point forward, but it really shook the academy. It was close to home. It was 50 miles away. It was New York City.
Oh my gosh, that didn't even click in my mind.
Yep. So they were, very close to home, and we hadn't been in an active period of war for quite some time.
Right.
And it definitely changed the tone and the culture of the academy moving forward. It was this new sense of seriousness set in amongst the Corps cadets. Because everybody who was graduating there, you're now graduating and like going off to lead men and women in combat.
And now all of a sudden the reality of this is why.
Right. I talk about this quite a bit. It was hard to stay at West Point. I had one of my best friends from high school enlisted, and he was more than capable of going to the academy himself. He could have got in, smarter than I was. And he enlisted in the infantry, had his Ranger tab, and was an E5 within like 2 or 3 years.
Fast track, that's nice.
Fast track. Ended up getting killed by a piece of shrapnel my senior year at the academy. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's just I remember I was working on a history report when my best friend called me and said, "Hey man, I have to deliver this news to you, but Brett got killed." And we had things happen like that throughout the course of those 4 years. Classmates who we knew very well would go off, they'd graduate, and then they'd be announcing their name as being killed in action, a year later. So it was, graduating wasn't an accomplishment like you might think it would be. It was a next step to get to where we needed to be, and that was leading people in that environment. So it was a very incredible experience. It shaped who I am, but at the same time, it was very difficult to not drop out and go join the others downrange. So.
Wow, yeah. So you graduated West Point, and while you were in West Point, did you choose the infantry, or because I'm not exactly sure how commissioning works, to be honest with you.
Yep. Yeah. And most of it works like this, but at the academy, you get to choose your branch based on your class rank.
Okay.
So the folks at the top, and they evaluate that not just academically, but it's also from a military standpoint, a physical standpoint, overall performance, right? So. I was coming in around the middle of the pack, to say the least. I struggled a little bit academically. But yes, I chose infantry. That was kind of one of my outlets. There's a small, kind of a pretty small group of us at the academy who are very kind of leadership, military oriented, and you think you're going to the United States Military Academy and you're going to get military training while you're there, and certainly there's some of that embedded throughout, and certainly part of the culture, but it's not the type of training that I was expecting, going into high school. The primary focus there is on academics, and here's why. They use a very different academic method there called the Thayer method, which is named after Colonel Sylvanus Thayer, who's considered to be the founder of West Point.
Okay.
And what the Thayer method is you basically read the material before you go to class. The second you walk through the door, you're tested on it. And then the instructor teaches you the material.
Oh, right. I can kind of get behind that.
Right?
I can see that.
So what it does, after 4 years of doing that, it teaches you to pick up a manual and learn very complex information on your own.
You kind of have to be like self-starter with a lot of things.
Yep. You've got to be a self-starter, and boy, did that come in handy in a counterinsurgency environment in the Middle East.
Right.
It just, where a lot of what we had to do was learn on the fly and adapt. And there's ways you absolutely despise being at the academy when you're there. But it really doesn't sink in what that experience did for you until several years later, and I can absolutely see the effect that it had on me. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I wouldn't want to do it again either.
I hear that. I'm picking up a lot of commonality with like the DLI. The students, a lot of them are brand new students who were talking about this earlier, who have been in the military for a whole 15 minutes, and they get to the DLI to go stick their face in a book and listen to instructors, and they're learning a language. And it's interesting because there's not a lot of military training. You're in a military environment, but you're not really doing a lot of the warrior tasks and drills on a consecutive basis and whatnot.
Right on. I mean, throughout our careers, we have to retain our expertise, our tactical expertise throughout our careers, right? We have to be able to turn that on like a switch and execute if needed, right? But there's so many other skill sets and factors that are human based, that are part of the current operating environment that we see across the world now. It's not conventional World War II style anymore. It's relationship building, it's nation building.
Again,
and all of that's grounded in our ability to empathize and build relationships, right? So language is a huge tool to be able to do that.
Cultural understanding.
Absolutely. And DLI is wow. I mean, I would put DLI up there as being academically as challenging as West Point was.
Yeah.
And I even had a base in Arabic coming in, a really good base.
Wow.
But when you are burning, 10, 12 hours a day of nonstop Arabic by native instructors or nonstop whatever language you're taking. I mean, it is, by the time you're through that course, it's hard, but
Did you dream in Arabic?
I started to at DLI, yeah, which is a good sign. I was glad. So maybe it's become a little easier now. But
what's the final test? What's that test that everybody freaks out about?
Oh, the defense language
the D-Lab.
proficiency test. Yeah.
Is that what it's called, the D-Lab?
Yeah, it's called the D-Lab, I think.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of, because again, I used to work at the clinic, so we get a lot of people like, I have a stomach ache. I'm like, no, you have the D-Lab today.
That's exactly what it is too. And it's, that's the culmination test of all your work. And I mean, if you're a solid student, if you're putting the work in, you're going to do fine on it. But yeah,
that's awesome.
It's one you definitely get nervous about. I don't care who you are.
So in between commission and the Defense Language Institute, the Presidio Monterey, you just told me, were you at Bragg?
I was actually at Fort Hood.
Fort Hood.
Where I deployed out of. Yep.
What was your first unit? And
so I was with the 1st Cavalry Division.
Awesome.
1/8 Cav. So we were. I joined them sometime in 2006, and within a couple months we were on our way to Baghdad during the surge.
So 2006. Yeah, that's a heavy time to go to Iraq.
Yeah, it was basically pre-surge when we were there, or when we arrived. So it was kind of a unique deployment. It was, you're there just before the surge kicks off.
Mm-hmm.
You're there through the duration of the surge, and then the aftermath afterwards, right?
How long were you deployed for?
The total deployment was about 1.5 years, or it was about 15 months or so.
So did you guys get extended?
Yes.
So now that I think about it, around that same time, I was downrange 2006, 2007, and they did extend it. We were about, who's counting, but we were like 83 days out from coming home. They're like, don't pack your bags. Here's an additional 3 months. So I wonder if that's kind of a
emotionally brutal thing, right?
Tell me about it.
You kind of all see it coming. You kind of know you're going to get extended the whole time. Most people went in with that mindset, but it's until it's kind of locked in, it's just always looming over your head. And it's a paradox. I mean, you grow so accustomed to that environment, there is almost a little bit of a fear of coming home and what it's going to be like, and how are you going to adapt? And you're walking into a lot of unknowns, but at the same breath, you can't wait to come home. You know? So it was definitely a very interesting journey.
Justin and I, we had. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it seemed to me like everyone was being extended in 2006 and 2007 for some reason. Like all the big Army guys their deployments were being extended up to 18 months. I believe my good friend Rudy Maldonado, he got extended at that same time, right around that same time frame. And it was why was that? Why was it such a common occurrence for that to happen right around then?
I would think our op tempo and our deployment cycle was being so like back to back to back. Like the reserves were deployed, and they and the cycle behind it, where you get people burnt out and burnt out.
Had everyone gone through a cycle already at that point? Like all the big units in the military had already spent time over there, and so they started extending everyone? I mean, what? Maybe. I don't understand why they would even do that. I mean, there wasn't enough people in reserve that hadn't been yet?
Well, I'm not sure on the specifics, right? But it does deal with manpower, And remember during the surge that we were really significantly increasing the number of troops that we had over there during that time period, which is so important. If you can't protect the population that you're trying to influence, then there's no point in trying to influence them. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Whoever can satisfy that bottom pillar of Maslow the best is what that population is going to gravitate towards. And if you can't protect them, why would they have any reason to?
That's a pretty good point.
To work with you.
The presence of soldiers, I think, has as much of a psychological impact on the native people.
Right.
That, just as much as the actual impact of the soldiers. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and it's, and I saw it firsthand. I mean, the surge worked. It worked, hands down. The problem is it only lasted, a year and a half, 2 years. But, because after that, it almost became unsustainable for our country as it stands today, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we first got there, our sectors were enormous. It was very difficult to, actively secure a population. And we've all heard the stories of, the moment the Americans leave, that's when the insurgent teams come in,
implode.
Rape, torture, kill, kidnap. So if you can't prevent that, it's very difficult to make positive improvements elsewhere. So when the surge happened, we were able to do that much more effectively.
Yeah, I hear that. This goes back to playing on the importance of building those relationships, having cultural understanding, and initiating the indigenous population to be self-sufficient, take care of themselves. The MIT teams going out and teaching, working with the Iraqi army and the Iraqi police, and hopefully, finding the best of the best within that population to really stand tall within their own communities, to protect, to serve, and to do all the things that we like to think we're doing here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Right on.
So, there's something that's on the back of my mind that really I kind of want to talk to you about, and it's your Purple Heart. You had a situation happen that is a focal point, maybe a hinge point in your life that led you into the work that you're doing now. The book that you've written that's on its way, Beauty of a Darker Soul, and darkersouls.com.
Right.
So it's such an interesting dynamic, the nature of your injury. Sniper fire is very specific when you're talking about the trauma behind it. Blast injuries, fire, gunshot wounds, but specifically sniper wounds. And this one in particular was, for lack of a better term, pretty grave.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, can you set the stage for us?
Yeah, sure. So we were actually doing a dismounted patrol in Baghdad. We had just gotten, we had just completed basically a humanitarian mission.
Nice. See, there we go again. And, building bridges.
Yeah, it was a bit of a risky one, but it went very well, and it was a huge thing. We had the Iraqi police leading it. It was a good patrol. But we later on got diverted to another part of the sector, and one of our trucks was engaged by an RPG, so they stopped and they noticed a suspicious driver in the area. So myself and Staff Sergeant Marlon Harper got out of the trucks to try to search that. And I was looking for any type of paraphernalia in the car or whatnot. And Marlon was checking the driver for any explosives material that he may have had. And the whole time I was, again, Arabic coming into play here, but I was questioning the driver in Arabic to really try to to nail this in. And a few seconds later, we were engaged by an enemy sniper, and the huge caliber bullet, the bullet first ripped through Marlon's left arm, severed his aorta, and then it exited out of his chest and ricocheted into my thigh and severed my femoral artery.
Golly.
Right? And another piece split off from that and actually hit our interpreters, a minor wound. But that basically sets the stage for that moment.
What a hell of a time to go to a commercial break. So real quick, I want the audience to know, when you're talking about the trauma of those injuries, the aorta, we have our arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, veins, and it's all one big closed circulatory system. Our capillaries are the smallest, where one single individual blood cell goes through the capillaries to maximize on gas exchange and all that stuff. But your aorta, every single person listening right now, look at your thumb. Your aorta is just about a little bit bigger than the widest part of your thumb. Right. Think about that when you're comprehending the nature of this situation that Josh Mance just explained to us. This is the Veterans Take Charge Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Bert Marks presenting Town Hall Night at Freedom Forum. Among the local speakers, Scott McGilvery will be discussing alternatives to pumping treated sewage water into our aquifer. Christina Hildebrand will address SB 18, Children's Rights. Fox Sloan will cover CPS issues, and Becky Steinbrunner will report on the Aptos Village Project. Hear these speakers live at Freedom Forum, 1900 17th Avenue, Santa Cruz, Wednesday, May 18th at 7 p.m. Doors open at 6:30. Free. Donations welcome.
The Ebb and Flow River Arts Celebration is coming soon, Friday, June 2nd, for art making, dance, and fun on Cooper Street in downtown Santa Cruz. At 9 p.m., join the Night Walk along the San Lorenzo River, led by a jazz band, and see LED-lit aerial dancers and sculptures. Then, on June 3rd, flow into the Kinetic Art Parade at noon on the Riverwalk from Kaiser Arena to the Tannery Arts Center. A full day of family-friendly fun, dance, art, music, food, and celebration. Sponsored by KSCO, Santa Cruz County Bank, and Sutter Maternity and Surgery Center. Go to artscouncilsc.org. See you there.
Healthcare that fits your Santa Cruz lifestyle. That's why Dignity Health Dominican Hospital and Dignity Health Medical Group Dominican work with you to make personal choices regarding your health. It's the type of care we can offer because we're more than just a hospital and medical group. We're part of this community. Visit DominicanHospital.org to find a doctor and start living healthy today. Healthcare that fits your Santa Cruz lifestyle. Dignity Health. Hello, human kindness.
I'm Gary Shapiro, host of From the Bookshelf here on KSCO. This week, my guest is movie star Tab Hunter. We talk about his film career, we talk about his recording career, his years as a horseman and ice skater. It's fascinating. Join me Monday at 7 with Tab Hunter for From the Bookshelf with me, Gary Shapiro.
This is the Veterans Take Charge Radio Show. Welcome back. Josh was just telling us he's setting the stage for the situation that got him medevaced out of Baghdad. For those of you who are just now joining us, Josh, one of his soldiers was hit by sniper fire. Sniper fire ricocheted and hit him, and a fragment ricocheted and hit their interpreter. So, I mean, that's in itself is kind of amazing. And I don't mean that in a good way. It's amazing, you know. The initial injury took the life of the first soldier, and the second injury, we'll pick up right where you left off.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, basically, we're at a point now where, you know, one guy has a severed aorta, and another guy has a severed femoral, right? And you know, as you know, as a medic yourself, right? You know, that's
triage just got real.
Yeah, basically 2 minutes or less to live in most cases, right? So it was actually pretty bizarre. I did not know that I was shot right away. I felt like something was off, something was wrong, but I couldn't pin down what it was.
It's like that fight or flight adrenal dump.
Yeah, you know, your body, it's amazing what the body does in situations. You know, I had a lot of bizarre things happen, like slow motion time, fast motion time, auditory distortion. You know, I could only hear my own voice. Initially, I could only hear my own voice calling for the medic, you know, and that the initial sound of the sniper shot.
What about the sense of smell? I've heard that the sense of smell gets kind of
funny. You know, the smell, I don't, that's one thing I don't, that doesn't really stick out to me is the smell, but not really sure why. Everything else does, but it's you know, the initial hit kind of on my end, it almost felt like an ocean wave picking you up. You know, it was like this slow absorption of this shock, right? And my eyes locked with Marlon's, and he had just I would describe it as a look of acceptance in his eyes. It wasn't one of fear or pain. It was acceptance. And again, not knowing that I was hit, and this was a instinctual response, but I drug him to the base of the nearest vehicle to safety and started stripping off his gear. Took a knee and was working on him, and then I saw that his aorta was severed, and my medic arrived about, you know, not 2 or 3 seconds later.
High speed. Who
was only 19 years old, you know, and that's a moment that I look at as, you know, here's a 19-year-old kid, right, who just realized that he had 2 catastrophic injuries to deal with at the same time, and although he made the correct choice from a triage standpoint, you know, he chose to try to save me because I had a slightly better chance of survival than Marlon did.
Right.
But, you know, never forget that Marlon, like, raised this guy. Marlon was the senior NCO of that platoon. He raised them, right? So, you know, they're going to still have to live with the moral weight of that for the rest of their life.
For sure.
Which is a very difficult thing to shake. You know, we'll talk about that more later, but...
How long did it take for Marlon to pass from the time that he was hit?
I don't really know. I'll tell you, he was unconscious when I got to him. I think it was pretty instantaneous. I don't believe he experienced any type of pain whatsoever.
That's the biggest artery in the body, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so, I mean, the amount of blood that can come out through that being severed you're pumping blood so fast.
It's possible he lost consciousness before he hit the ground.
Yeah. He was not with it.
Which is what you said, the acceptance. I mean, it hit him so hard, so quick, and it happened so fast. He was done before he even fell.
I mean, like, blood pressure drops, everything stops working properly. You know, like I said, I mean, he very well could have been unconscious before he hit the floor.
Right. So Marlon was loaded into one vehicle. I was taken to the other, and what was bizarre is when my medic arrived, I kind of went into this weird state of subconsciousness for a couple seconds. You know, I fell down, and I wasn't completely unconscious, but I could just hear basically echoes, and the feeling that I describe it as is basically, you know, this is fitting for Mother's Day, right? For all you moms out there, if you've ever you know, taken care of a sick kid who didn't want to go to school because they weren't feeling well, you know, you bring them a cup of tea and they cover back up in their covers and everything's all happy. You know,
moms are amazing.
That's what it felt like, right? For a couple seconds. And my men were dragging me, and what snapped me out of that is I heard, and I was just like peacefully kind of letting go. I didn't even know what was going on. I was just relaxing, right? Wow. Deep sleep. And I heard one of my guys just scream, you know, "Come on, sir!" And I could just hear the pain in his voice, you know, and not physical pain; it was emotional pain.
Yeah.
You know, and I clearly remember this hitting me, and it was, you know, I at that moment I'm like, I still have to do whatever I possibly can to support these men. I've got to do my part. I'm still their leader, you know. I might be pretty much worthless, but I can't give up. I can't give up for them. You know, had nothing to do with me. You know, and then I think when they were dragging me into the vehicle and they sat me up initially, and the only way I can explain it is that pushed the remaining blood in my body to the chest cavity and the vital organs and allowed me to regain full consciousness. And then the men, you know, that team executed just a flawless evacuation process to the nearest trauma unit, which was fortunately only about 10 minutes away or so. I don't know how far, but
I don't want to backtrack too far in the story, but when we were at lunch, you explained what the piece of metal that hit you in the leg actually would have looked like after impacting Marlon and then going through him and into your body. Can you just describe that for the listeners, like what that chunk of metal that hit you must have been shaped like and looked like?
Well, if that bullet would have hit my leg first, where it did, I wouldn't have a leg. Yeah, it would have blown it clean off. So it went through Marlon first, and because of that, it was like this mangled piece of metal the size of my fist that basically blew out my entire femoral artery.
Which is the inner thigh, for those of you that don't know.
I was just going to, I'm glad you said that. Also, for the listening audience, you know, when we're talking about the size and caliber of this round, you know, 5.56 or 7.62 is something along the lines of like a pen cap in you
tip
know,
of your pinky, maybe.
Yeah, but the
If
caliber of this was, I mean, a 50 caliber.
It's the one you don't want to get hit with.
Yeah.
It's so powerful that I've heard of it snapping people's necks as it blows by their head.
Yeah, you could
It doesn't
miss
even
and do
have to hit the person you're aiming at, and it can
damage.
kill them.
Yeah, it was a weapon of that caliber, right? That was a much higher caliber weapon. Vicious weapon system.
Bottom line up front, the reality is real. The enemy is real, and their capabilities is something that we should not mess around with. So you got medevaced, and I want to give a high five and a big round of applause for the medics, the medic, and the medical team, the evac team, and those who were waiting for you at the trauma center.
Right.
You know,
you know, and I'll tell you the trauma unit. You know, when the ramp on that vehicle during the ride there, you know, I had lost almost all the blood in my body. I mean, the medic cinched up a tourniquet as quickly as he could, but by then a couple of minutes had already went by.
Oh my God.
So I was hanging on by a thread. Like I didn't have the strength to even unbuckle my Kevlar helmet, which is just a small piece of plastic. And I really just made it my only objective to try to stay conscious until I got to that trauma team.
Damn straight.
And did. And when that ramp dropped, man, I'll tell you what, you know, for those of you who have served, you know, the kind of the culture in the military, the infantry boys tend to have a bit of a chip on their shoulder sometimes. You know, they can kind of go around thinking that they're the ones that know what combat's all about, and usually it's just a healthy kind of competition thing and friendly competition. You know, I never and I never subscribed to that mentality myself, but at the same time I never disproved it more than on this day. You know, I saw a trauma unit execute the most well-rehearsed battle drill I've ever seen in my life. You know, just every single person on that team was smooth. They were calm. They were each had a specific job. I mean, they're just methodical. It was like a choreographed dance.
I love medics.
You know,
totally biased.
But
whatever.
Despite their best efforts, though, you know, a few more minutes went by, and I could literally feel myself starting to die. And
oh my God,
as you well know, and you know, when you're dying of blood loss, you're essentially suffocating. So your body will pull the remaining blood to the chest cavity to protect the vital organs.
Hypovolemic shock.
Right. And I could actually feel that happening. You know, so I could feel
the
the
constriction going on.
Could feel as all the blood would leave my legs and my extremities that they would constrict and basically become worthless, right? Wow. And then that blood creeping sensation would move up through my quads. And they became numb. When that sensation hit my stomach, it felt like I was doing the hardest core CrossFit workout that you can think of, but for whatever reason you cannot stop. Right? It was totally an anaerobic pain. I didn't have any physical pain, but it was an anaerobic pain, like you're suffocating. And then when that feeling hit my chest, I consciously knew that was it. I took my last breath. I said my last thought, and I died.
What was that like?
So I get that question a lot. Yeah,
That's one of the great questions of mankind, right?
Yeah, because I mean, think about it. Like I don't know what that's like.
We're all going to experience it, and I think a lot of people fear it. You know, is it something to be feared?
Well, let me tell you what happened. One, I didn't have like an out of body experience. Like I didn't see a white light. I didn't float over top of my body or anything like that. And you know, there can be a lot of controversy over things like that. We just don't know if it's a quick dream, if it's a trick of the mind, whatever. What I did experience, I think, was even more powerful because I know I was conscious in the last, and I'm talking the last second or two of my life. And the only way I can describe that feeling is absolute and complete submission to something much greater than us. You know, and I don't try to define what that is. Lots of people can interpret that in what ways that means to them. But in that feeling of absolute submission was the most overwhelming sense of peace that I've ever experienced. And the moment of my death was the most peaceful moment of my life. That's amazing. When you reach a point of complete submission, I mean complete and absolute submission. You know, every good, every bad, every positive, every negative, all of it falls away. You know, and you're just part of something much bigger, and it's a beautiful thing. You know.
So it was, in a sense, you were kind of okay with what was happening.
I was, yeah. I mean, you don't have a choice. That's the thing. Like, there is no choice to be okay with it or not, and that's kind of the beauty of it. It was an involuntary process, right? That many of us fear because we haven't been there, we don't know. But what I can say is that process was the most powerful thing I've ever experienced. I mean, it wasn't a white light. It wasn't floating above me. You know, no, it was a very clear feeling of just complete submission. You don't have any other choice but to submit. You know,
I'm picking up the analogy. I'm thinking about this right now. You know, we go through the metaphor like we're all just a drop in a bucket, and it sounds like this acceptance. We're rejoining that bucket. You know, submitting to a bigger thing. You know? Right.
Regardless of our faith or our spirituality or preference, right? It's like I do believe that our energy has to go somewhere when we die. You know, it doesn't
absolutely.
You know, it has to go somewhere, and that's what it kind of felt like. It's like you're no longer part of this one thing in me, right? You're part of everyone and everything, and that's what the feeling was like. Like you're part of the I hesitate to use the word system, right? I don't want to call it a system, but I'm not sure what better word to use.
Well, if the body's a vessel, right? The vessel's gone, but the spirit, whatever the energy, right? It's still there. The spirit's eternal. The energy's eternal.
Yeah.
And so maybe, I mean, that's kind of a Christian way to look at it, I guess. I'm not Christian, but
right. Mm-hmm.
I'm really intrigued about talks like this, about this topic.
So
it's interesting.
You flatlined, you coded in probably the best place ever.
Right, yep.
This was on the operating table. And the team brought you back. How long were you down for?
15 minutes. So I mean, here's a little backstory, right? So I woke up about 2 days later in the green zone to learn that I'd flatlined for 15 minutes, and what was most bizarre about it is, and you know this, right? It's like typically the medical standard where a lot of physicians will call it on a patient is around the 6-minute mark, because that's when serious brain damage sets in. But when you go to 15,
that's kind of unheard of.
They're expecting catastrophic brain damage,
if any activity ever.
Yeah, if ever, right? And I woke up to this nurse in the green zone who asked me where I was, and I told her, and her jaw dropped. And I had almost basically a perfect recollection of the event. Now, I mean, at the time I was drugged up on morphine, methadone, Percocet. They had me pretty heavily medicated, obviously because of the pain, but even with that, I was still able to recall it in the level of detail that I am now. But more importantly, I learned that I kind of saw this coming, but I learned that Marlon Harper didn't make it, and as I'd soon come to find out, the experience of dying would pale into comparison to the 10-year emotional journey that would follow it.
The experience
as I
of living.
sought to find meaning in a second life.
Oh, wee. This is the Veterans Take Charge radio show. When we come back, we're going to talk about that second life. We're going to talk about the road to recovery, everything that has happened from that point on. Man, I'm so glad you're here with us. I'm so glad you're here with us.
Likewise.
This is the Veterans Take Charge radio show.
KSCO, Santa Cruz.
CBS News, I'm Jim Taylor. What will tomorrow bring? It's what every cybersecurity expert is thinking about tonight. So the global ransomware, born in NSA labs, hitting 200,000 victims since Friday, already morphing, poised to do more. Rod Wainwright is the head of Europol.
The ransomware itself has been combined with a worm application that allows, therefore, the infection of one computer to quickly spread across other networks. That's why we're seeing these numbers increasing all the time.
Britain's hard-hit National Health Service returning to normal, sort of. Sky News correspondent Paul Kelso.
In London, the largest trust in the country, for a third day has diverted ambulances and is cancelling some appointments on Monday. In Lincolnshire, the trust has cancelled all appointments for tomorrow. And they and Northumbria NHS have used social media to warn staff not to switch on devices until they've been cleared.
Microsoft President Brad Smith comparing the leak of NSA exploits to the theft of missiles from the American military. Points also to the WikiLeaks dump of CIA hacking tools. An equivalent scenario, he says, with conventional weapons would be the U.S. military having some of its Tomahawk missiles stolen. Another ballistic missile launch from North Korea, the current dictatorship's seventh. CBS News correspondent Adriana Diaz reporting from Beijing.
The regime continues to test banned ballistic missiles despite worldwide condemnation. But the U.S. military says the flight pattern of today's launch was not consistent with an intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, the type that could reach the U.S. mainland. In January, North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un said an ICBM test was imminent, but it hasn't happened yet. This shorter-range test comes days after South Korea elected a new president who wants to engage Pyongyang, not isolate it.
6 years after Navy SEALs hunted down and killed Osama bin Laden, his terror organization continues to cast a shadow over national security. Ali Soufan is a former FBI investigator, spent 2 years analyzing documents from bin Laden's compound, and he speaks about that on CBS's 60 Minutes.
I don't believe even bin Laden, in his wildest dreams, thought that he will have followers who command armies, troops, control lands, are extremely powerful geopolitical players as Al-Qaeda today.
High-speed chase in Hollywood. Details from KNX reporters Margaret Carrero.
Officers from the LAPD's Hollywood division were chasing a stolen car around 2 in the morning when the car lost control and slammed into a tree. It took down a light pole and burst into flames. Sergeant Barry Montgomery.
Despite efforts by officers to rescue the occupants, extinguishing as many as 8 to 9 fire extinguishers, they were unable to save the 2 suspects inside the vehicle.
This man was across the street. He saw the whole thing.
The car blew up like boom.
This is CBS News.
After all the sleep you cost your mom through the years, it's time to give it all back. I'm Scott Tannen, founder of Boll & Branch. This Mother's Day, give your mom the gift she deserves: great sleep on Boll & Branch sheets. Our sheets are handcrafted from 100% organic cotton. They get softer over time. We guarantee she'll love them. She can try them risk-free for 30 nights. Now through Mother's Day, get $50 off your first set plus free shipping at bollandbranch.com, promo code SLEEP. That's bollandbranch.com, promo code SLEEP.
Wouldn't it be great if you could stop crime before it happens? With the Ring Floodlight Cam, you can. I'm Jamie Siminoff, inventor and founder of Ring. Floodlight Cam is a motion-activated HD security camera that connects right to your phone, so you're alerted when anyone steps onto your property. You can now see, speak, or even sound an alarm right from your phone, anywhere, anytime.
Does your floodlight prevent crime? Ours does. Go to ring.com/advantage and save $150 off of a Ring of Security kit. That's ring.com/advantage.
If President Trump could, he probably would do whatever Vladimir does.
One with dolphins, piloted a hang glider. Last week, he played ice hockey in front of reporters in Sochi. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin is showing off his skills as a pianist, tickling the ivories as he awaited Chinese President Xi Jinping at a summit in Beijing. Mr. Putin played 2 songs, both by Russian composers, Evening Song and Moscow Windows. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS News.
Medicaid changes being advanced as part of the health overhaul are sounding familiar alarms for school districts getting their financial footing after the Great Recession. Administrators say services, even beyond those funded by the state federal health care program, could be at risk should Congress follow through with the cuts. I'm Jim Taylor, CBS News.
Good afternoon. You're listening to KSCO Santa Cruz, KOMY Watsonville, KSCO.com, ZBSradio.com, and also live on YouTube. Check it out at the KSCO Global channel. Don't forget to subscribe. It's 5:05. We'll take a quick look at your weather and traffic. Highway 1, northbound to Santa Cruz, all clear right now. Southbound looking good through the county. Looks heavy at Moss Landing. Northbound from the Castroville cutoff to Struve Road. Monterey Seaside area all clear on the 1 and 68 between there and Salinas 101. Pretty heavy there northbound. It's going to be a long ride between 156 and Morgan Hill. Another round of a slowdown as you pass Coyote. 17 also nightmarish at this time. Parking Lot City from Scotts Valley pretty much all the way to Los Gatos. You'll pick up in speed for a minute after you pass the summit. Southbound 17 getting along. Other roadways looking good. Weather tonight, cloudy, a low near 49. A small craft advisory in effect on the Monterey Bay. Cloudy tomorrow and windy as well, up to 26 miles per hour, especially in the afternoon. But we will have a sunny one afternoon. Highs in the mid-60s to low 70s. 5:06 at KSCO. Time for the Veterans Take Charge radio show with your host, Justin Baker and Dave Ramos. Hour 2 starts right now on KSCO.
This is the Veterans Take Charge radio show. If you missed the first hour, you need to do some doggone push-ups. You missed some darn good stuff.
It's all on YouTube, KSCO Global, Veterans Take Charge radio show with today's date.
What he said. We're in studio with former infantry officer of the United States Army, Joshua Mons. I'm going to give you another high five, brother.
There we go. Nice.
Thank you very much for being here. So Josh was telling us his story about his life, getting to know why you joined the military, how, your influence on, just go back and listen to it. It was freaking good. Ultimately, it ended up with your injury and dying, being dead for 15 minutes, right, and then coming back because of outstanding medics. And you have a mission. That's unfulfilled, and that's why you're back, in my interpretation of what's going on. So after recovery from your injury, you were compelled to go back.
Yeah.
You wanted to go back.
And that's something that most of the service members I know would want to do the same. You know, so nothing special about that. What was kind of unique, I was very fortunate to make a very fast recovery. And,
Very fortunate.
You know, I mean,
understatement, man.
Yeah. You know, and roughly, you know, 4 or 5 months later, I was back in Baghdad. Wow. And, you know, finished the tour and came back. And you know, like over the last 10 years, it's I used to ask myself why I went back as fast as I did. Right. And because it was crazy.
Another question. How long in your deployment did this happen? At what point in your deployment?
It's probably about halfway through.
Okay. And so your guys were still there
My guys were
when you
still
healed and came back. Yeah. So you were rushing to get back to your team.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that started with the plane ride back to the United States. You know, it's not like every minute on that plane is a minute closer to home. It's a minute farther away from your guys that you're leaving. You know, and you know, at Walter Reed, and I was evacuated at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Phenomenal clinical care. But you know, I remember when I came out of another surgery, first words I was like to the doctor, when can I go back? You know, he kind of did what you just did there. He kind of smiled a little bit, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, you're not going anywhere anytime soon." So I was like, "All right," you know, and I just kept quiet and. You know, started doing everything. You know, I was working out at the gym. I was doing whatever I could. I mean, by the time I got out of there, I was pulling staples out of my legs with a Gerber. You know, and
as a medic, I highly recommend against doing stuff like that.
Don't do that.
Go on.
Don't pull stuff out of your medical records either. But anyway, no, there was this insatiable drive to get back to those guys, and almost irrational, right? And I say irrational because, you know, if my family wasn't in the picture, this would be all good, right? But you know, my mom had just got a call 4 months earlier that said, "Ma'am, your son has been critically wounded. He probably won't make it through the night. Get on a plane to Germany now, if you want the opportunity to see him again," right? So the prognosis is grim, to say the least, right? But my you know, when your mom gets a call like that. You know, what one of the things I'm guilty about today is, and it's fitting this is Mother's Day, right? But it's like her strength through this whole thing, because she never questioned me about going back. Okay. She got it. My stepdad got it. Everybody got it, right? But they didn't want to try to talk me out of it. I mean, they tried to subtly, but they knew I wasn't hearing it. And that's the thing. I've always been very close with my family, but I couldn't see it. Like, I was so consumed by something else that I went back and did this like impossible thing. And as I was going through this is almost 10 years ago, you know, and as I told you over lunch, you know, going through the process of writing this book over the last 2 years has probably been the most therapeutic thing that I've ever done. And I say that because I had to ask the really hard questions to myself and stay with it until I could find an answer that was productive and helpful to other people who might be going through similar situations. And I used to have people ask me all the time, you know, "Why'd you go back so fast?" You know, and you know, "Are you crazy?" You know, well, no, you know, I used to say I went back because of my men, you know, which there's truth to that. And I went back because I wanted to prove to myself as an infantry officer that I could get back on the horse and still do my job, you know? And certainly there's truth to that. But the whole time, this whole decade, there was something deeper. There was something more that I could never recognize or put my finger on, but it was there, right? And as I've uncovered since, what drove me to go back was guilt, you know, but not in the form of survivor's guilt per se.
That's always the first thing that pops into my mind.
Yeah, not the fact that Harper died and I didn't. You know, I resolved that a long time ago, and honestly, I think it helped that I got killed with him in a way, because I kind of went there too. But it was guilt in the sense that, and these are the microscopic details about traumatic experiences that a lot of people just don't know to look at, don't know how to access. But you know, they're the details that can plague you and drive those deep emotional voids that you experience for years and years and decades on end. And uncovering those details is what I've been doing the last couple years, right? But you know, at Walter Reed, for example, You know, and I should preface this by saying that, you know, my own healing process from this emotionally, I think, was delayed for almost a decade because there was such an overt focus from everyone in my life around this isolated experience of dying and coming back to life. You know, and the whole time I didn't really believe that that experience in itself was traumatic for me, right? And I'm not saying that to sound bravado or anything. It just, like I told you before, with the exception of losing Marlon that day, of course, that experience was largely a positive one for me. You know, I just said I got to discover the most peaceful feeling of life is death itself, right? So, you know, long story short, that emotional journey was filled with a lot of pitfalls, and the bottom line thing that emerged is trauma isn't always what it seems. You know, it's this overt focus on dying to the point where I started to believe there should be something wrong because of that. You know, it just distracted me the entire time. You know, I'm not blaming anyone for that. I couldn't even recognize it in myself, most importantly. But uncovering those details is what ultimately allowed me to heal. And one of those was asking the question, why was I so driven to go back so fast, right? Like, and this is just one of many examples, but, you know, Walter Reed, the clinical care, again, was phenomenal. No other place I'd rather be for trauma care than that. But it's a very difficult place to be emotionally. You know, you're surrounded by, and for those of you who don't know, Walter Reed is where most of the most severely wounded service members are evacuated to for recovery. So I was surrounded by, you know, other service members who were, you know, amputees, burn victims, just the most horrendous injuries you can imagine. You know, their families around, and I was one of the few that was expected to make a full recovery, you know, and a relatively quick one at that. Despite how devastating this injury was, right? Despite how severe it was. Right. And you know, the image that I'll never shake, and I don't want to shake it, is I remember seeing this. This is towards the end of that 4 months when I was up and around pretty good. But I remember walking by this beautiful young blonde girl, early 20s, pushing around her new double amputee fiance in a wheelchair. You know, and it just struck me like how they're going to have to redream their dreams. You know, how are they going to be a year from now, 10 years from now, if at all? And so this guilt that I'm speaking of was a guilt in my own ability to heal. You know, why am I capable of healing this? Why don't I have any brain damage from this? Why, you know? So it's there's a big difference here. The trauma isn't about getting shot. Right. It's about everything that surrounded it. Yeah. Right. Not only that incident, but also, you know, years later. But I was trapped in this weird place between being guilty for being able to heal and guilty for not being downrange with my guys. They were still getting hit. Right. And it's like these forces propelled me to do something that was almost impossible and probably not very healthy. You know, I wouldn't trade it. As I said, I'd do it again. I would have probably approached it a little differently with my family. Definitely would have been more empathic if I could have been, right? But again, at the time, I wasn't cognizant of that. Going back though was absolutely worth it. You know what that meant to the rest of my men on my team. Yeah. And boy, did their faces change in the couple months that I was in the hospital. You know, you could see it on them. But most part, you know, like thanking I didn't know this would happen, but the medical team that saved me, the medical team that pulled off this miracle was still there. And I didn't know they would be, right? So we did a surprise visit, and it was a total surprise. And one of the best days of my life was being able to thank them in person. Yes. And it, you know, and again, you know, another kind of central truth that emerged for me over the last 2 years is trauma doesn't discriminate. Oh, you know, that's for darn sure. It impacts all of us from every walk of life, from every career field, you know, regardless of who you are. And we might make a tendency to compare our experiences to others and minimize ourselves because of it. Like, you know how many times I get somebody saying like, They'll hear me give a talk or something, and they'll come up to me afterwards and be like, Josh, what I went through is nothing like what you went through, but blah, 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 blah. And the first point in the conversation I can break that, I do, because it's not about, it's really important to resist the urge to compare yourselves with others.
I mean, that kind of delineates the whole us, them. You went through something that I didn't go through.
Right.
That reminds me of Nixon. I love this guy. It's one team, one fight. He was a attack submariner in the Navy. And he associates and he sees things. He went through a lot of the same things, but also very different things. But I want to reassure him that we're all in the same boat.
Right.
We're all in the same submarine.
You never. It's so true. And like if you were to get shot, right, that might have a completely different effect on you than it does for me. Like you're talking about processing like thousands and thousands of microscopic details around every one of these experiences. You're talking about how that experience, how who you are prior to that experience will have an impact on how it resonates with you, right? So the point is, try to resist the urge to compare yourselves with others. And what to close this, what I was saying is, thanking that trauma team for saving my life. Like, it wasn't just a great day for me; it was a great day for them.
Heck
right?
yeah!
Trauma units never get to see the results of their work. If they're lucky, they get a faint pulse back after a horrendous injury, life-saving heroic efforts, and they send that person on the way to the next echelon of care and hope for the best.
And then the next patient rolls in.
And without that complete knowledge, that can really open the door to the devastating emotions like shame and guilt and powerlessness, right? That can plague them for years to come. So lots of vicarious trauma going on there as well. It was just important, and it was just wonderful to be able to. They could see the results of their work in the flesh and blood,
That means a lot.
And know they're making a difference.
That really does.
Gives them meaning.
Ooh-wee, ooh-wee. This is the Veterans Take Charge radio show. We're in studio with Joshua Montz.
Come enjoy the amazing Redwood Mountain Fair. Music, arts, fun, food, and microbrews. There's something for everyone June 3rd and 4th at beautiful Roaring Camp in Felton. 22 fantastic bands on 2 stages. Arts and crafts, expanded kids zone. Discount tickets and detailed information, links to bands and artists, all available online at redwoodmountainfair.com.
Hi, this is Larry from Bullseye Archery in Scotts Valley. I'd like to talk about people coming in with bows they've bought online and from box stores. A lot of these bows are not tuned and not set for you. We have a pro shop and we can tune them and set them for you. We charge $60 to tune your bow, and we'd be more than happy to tune the bows that you buy from these places. Or you could buy them from us and just have them tuned and you'll get it for free.
I'm Jeannie. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our new range. We have French tuning, and we give lessons there, and we had quite a few people that have really enjoyed our little range. It's only 10 yards, but it's enough to do whatever you need. We have all our supplies, and if we don't have it, we will order it for you.
Bullseye Archery is located in Scotts Valley at 5299 Scotts Valley Drive, and phone number is 831-346-6156.
The Off the Lip Radio Show is the world's only live talk show dedicated to both surfing and skateboarding. As we record the surf and skate history in Santa Cruz and beyond, your host Neil Perlberg and co-host Terry Campion ask you to sit back and relax and enjoy the fun we have with our many iconic guests. Tune in every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on KSCO, or watch the live stream on the Surf Channel and catch the podcast on offthelipradio.com or on iTunes and TuneIn Radio.
Much like trauma does not discriminate, healing does not discriminate. So long as we search it out, so long as we go for it. We've heard of World War II veterans who go back to Normandy to close the loop and to find their healing. We've heard of Vietnam veterans who go back to Vietnam to, again, close the loop and to find that healing. Jack Stewart, just this past week on Veterans Day, he was talking about the way that he felt to the Vietnamese people and about that country. And it's all a way to search out that healing. Your what's the word I'm looking for? Doggone it. Your 10 years of healing has taken a lot of ups and downs. Right. How did you navigate this newly emerging sense of guilt and coming home and moving on from there?
Probably most importantly, that I didn't know that I was consumed by guilt. I didn't know shame back then. I didn't know powerlessness and betrayal, and most people didn't. I was, when I got back, a couple years later, 2009 time frame, I was pulled up to be a general's aide.
Nice. That's a good job.
Yeah, I didn't want it. I told the general that. That's what he wanted to hear, apparently. So, no, it ended up being a phenomenal experience. Again, I've just been blessed with just amazing opportunities that really shape who I am today, and that was definitely one of them. But 2009 was kind of an interesting time in the military. Post-surge. We had a huge influx of behavioral health challenges, divorce, suicide rates. Everything was spiking.
That's when post-traumatic stress started getting labeled and not thrown around, but identified.
Right.
A whole lot
Duty
more.
Started to take it seriously. Right.
Yes.
And even Secretary of Defense Robert Gates was personally driving that initiative from the top down. Even going as far as changing security clearance questions and whatnot in order to remove any type of barriers there were to seeking treatment. And basically they were really struggling with stigma back then. And back then the stigma was really surrounding, like, am I going to lose my career if I go seek help?
Right? That sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And back then, we can talk more about stigma in a second, but that was a big struggle back then. And they basically asked me to go on a national speaking circuit and leverage this story, this life and death experience, to capture people's attention.
As active duty?
As active duty,
Who was your main audience?
Everyone. And it was everything from tier 1 media outlets to the local Lions Club.
Wow.
So awesome. In the span of about 2 years, it was close to 200 speaking engagements. So on top of being an aide, so it was. But what we found is, capture people's attention with the message, and then drive home the real point of reducing or eliminating stigma associated with help-seeking behavior. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we did there for next year or two. And the message was important. It was accurate. It was helping a lot of people, right, in various different ways. The problem is, here I was as a national advocate of behavioral health field. I was all over John King, CNN, and Oprah, and Fox, and BBC, you name it.
Really? You met Oprah?
Yeah.
I feel like we'd be homies if I met Oprah.
Yeah. But it's like, despite, and half the conferences I was speaking to audiences of clinicians, so I almost had a near clinical understanding of PTS, at least as it was projected at that time.
Yeah.
But internally, I was collapsing. Right? And I didn't know I was collapsing. I was the face of this field in many respects. And, about a year into that speaking circuit, I hit the first suicidal spiral.
No kidding.
And I was actually with the general at a conference in D.C. And that night, found myself sitting in a corner of a hotel room, not having a clue who I was anymore.
Wow.
And it was ironic is the message that I had been preaching the whole time is, if you reach a point like that, a void like that, reach out, give somebody the opportunity at least, right? To give yourself the opportunity. And
real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. 831. No, as you were. 1-800-273-8255 is the National Suicide Hotline. Press the number 1 for veterans.
Right on.
Anytime, 24/7. If you're feeling homicidal, suicidal, down, depressed, anything like that, that's the number to call. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that is very important. Understand that I am fully cognizant and recognize that making the statement, reach out if you hit that point, is very different than being in that point for real. Because when you're in a state like that, there is no hope. There is no sense that anyone could possibly understand the depths of what you're experiencing, and that void is crippling, to say the least. And I understand that. And you know what I would say is, I reached out to one of my close colleagues that day. He was actually on the speaking circuit with me as well. Now, he was farther along in the healing process than I was. You know, and here I was. I still didn't even know that I needed to heal more, right? So I reached out to Jeff, and I did it really believing that there's no possible way that he would get it. You know.
So at this
It
point,
was a final act of desperation.
in the back of your mind, did you think that you were healed and that everything was good, and this happened as kind of a fluke, or was this?
I believed, and there was nothing untrue or inaccurate about the messages that I was delivering prior to that. Right?
For sure.
All the stigma reduction stuff. And the problem is I used to call them like the PowerPoint symptoms of PTSD, right? The things that we all get briefed on, or kind of the public's general perception of what trauma is and what types of symptoms manifest from it tend to be kind of the stuff you that are very stigmatized, you know, like I get jumpy when I hear loud noises, or, you know, severe anxiety, or you know, and certainly in some cases that's absolutely part of it for some people, right? But the most dangerous portion that I've uncovered is far deeper than that. Really? Far deeper than that. And that's what was bringing me down at the time. I just didn't understand it. So I didn't know that. I didn't have the perspective to even know that something was there. I could feel I was just an incredibly deep void. I was emotionally dead, but it was a feeling that was so complex that I didn't have the capacity to put it into words. So I, of course, do what we all do, you know, well, okay, drive on, you know, we'll figure this out. For me, driving on was doing 200 speaking engagements in like a year and a half. It was being a general's aide. It was working for a national nonprofit, and it was building all these community partnerships locally. I mean, I was running 4 jobs.
Yourself in work. You just get enveloped.
Well, work is a form of an addiction.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, people turn to different things to fill that void. We'll turn to anything to fill the void that shame causes. Anything, you know, because being consumed by a shame-based void is worse than death ever could be. Yeah. You know, it takes life away itself. So, you know, when we talk addiction, it goes far beyond substance abuse. You know, that could be sex, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be work, it could be whatever. But you know, I started to understand that. Right, Jeff connected with me immediately. Right, he picked up the phone and said the one thing that I never would have expected. And I was a mess. I was crying. Couldn't even speak. You know, and by this point, Jeff had known me for about a year. We'd done a lot of speaking together. And he goes, "Josh, good. I'm so happy for you." And I wanted to reach to the phone and kill him. Right? I was like, what are you talking about, man? And he went on to explain. And he's like, "Look, man, I have been close to you for a long time. I've seen these subtle signs in you that because I've walked that path before, I know they were there. I knew this was going to happen. I was just doing everything I could to plant the seeds in your mind so you'd make this phone call right now." The whole time.
Kidding. Was this the whole idea that like once you hit rock bottom, the only place to go is up?
This is the idea of what I consider to be the beauty of a darker soul.
Glad we're getting into that. I was going to ask you all about that.
You know, Jeff Hall that day leveraged his own experiences because he walked down that dark path before. He knows exactly what it felt like and worse. And because he successfully overcame it and found meaning in that suffering, it now enhances his capacity, all of our capacities, to make a positive difference in the lives of others, right? Doing the same. So Jeff did that for me, but that wasn't the end of it. You know, he linked me with one of the top therapists in the Department of Defense, who dropped everything she was doing the next day, the next morning, and
that's high speed.
Cleared her calendar, you know, and talked to me for 4 hours straight. And it wasn't a conversation about anxiety or what's wrong with me or anything like that. It was a conversation about emotional withdrawal. It's a conversation about shame and guilt, powerlessness, things that I never even considered before.
See, those are those seeds that need to be talked about.
Well, that's the crux of most of this stuff, you know, and it's unfortunately I mean, this is exactly why I do what I do today, is to hopefully add a significant level of depth to this conversation, because if we're not operating at that level of depth when we talk about these things, we can miss some really key points, you know, and the session that I had with that therapist that day was just life-changing for me, right? It wasn't the end of the road, but it was, you know, again, guilt is powerful. You know, I two things just real quick. You know, one thing she opened my eyes to was the power of emotional withdrawal, you know, and I'll say briefly that every suicidal spiral that I've been in, and there's been 3 very distinct ones over that 10-year period, but every single one, the catalyst was a relationship failure. The catalyst was not, or, you know, the relationship wasn't necessarily the cause, you know, it's a longer talk, but it was the catalyst every single time. You know, and emotional withdrawal, like being emotionally absent in a relationship and not being able to turn that emotional switch back on, and it would destroy, it can impact any relationship.
It's like robotic. You're going through the motions, but not feeling anything with it. That's the downward spiral in my mind.
The question is why, right? The question is, why does that happen?
Damn good question.
And is it mean that there's something wrong with you? Well, the answer is absolutely not. It's actually something right with you. Here's why, right? So, I mean, look at this, you know, and this is what she went on to explain that day. I never forgot it. You know, when you are, and this doesn't just apply to military and combat. This could apply to a kid living on the streets of inner city Chicago in gang environment. It could apply to a spouse who's in a violent domestic relationship, perpetually being beaten every day, you know, in whatever way it pertains to you. But when you are living in a chaotic environment like that, right, you have to suppress your emotional responses, not just to survive, but to thrive in those situations. You know, when you are constantly suppressing just crippling levels of fear, you know, and all of the emotions that anger and fear and betrayal, everything that pops up during a course of a deployment or any environment like that, you know, there come. I remember a very distinct point when this happened to me when I was deployed. We were well into deployment at this point, and this is before I got shot. But I remember we stopped. My lead vehicle called up, "Hey, sir, look to your right and tell me if that's an IED."
Oh, boy.
Right? And sure enough, it looked exactly like one. The problem is we were right in the kill zone. And you know, had that thing blown up, we'd have been dead instantly, right? But the initial fear that I felt, which lasted less than a second because I suppressed it right away, right? But was one of the most intense feelings of fear I had during that whole deployment. And how I had to respond to it, I stared at it, right? And I dared it to blow up. And this, seriously, and again, not a bravado thing. It was just, it was, and this calm came over me. And it's almost like when you're operating in the absence of emotion, that is when I was at my absolute best tactically.
It's like emotions can be compromised. Emotions can bring vulnerability in this specific situation. You know, in real world, not real world, but like in this.
Well, they can cause second guessing when you don't have time to second guess.
Yeah. You know, emotions are not bad. They're very good. But when you can suppress them in the heat of the moment, something like this, it's almost needed for survivability.
And even our training leads us to do that, right? We go through this training that teaches us to balance our physiology, you know, when we're in high stress environments. So we are trained very well to be able to suppress emotion. We are not trained well to turn the emotional switch back on when we get home.
Yes.
And that's where the majority of these problems happen in relationships. That's where a lot of this stuff manifests.
Freaking-lutely.
But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, right? And you know, I'll tell you, the hardest question that I have ever been asked is, how do you feel? And it was a question, and this question was literally the final kind of catalyst that finished opening the door to my healing process. Something that just happened last year. You know, I was shadowing a group session, a therapeutic group session with an organization. I've been involved in the behavioral health field for a long time, and part of what I do is shadow groups and just to get a better understanding of it. And this group process, they were doing what's called a morning check-in, right? Where everybody in the group basically says their name, what they're here for, and the core emotion that they're feeling
What you doing?
in the
How you
moment. You know,
feeling?
I feel sad, I feel happy, whatever. And they've got like the core emotions listed on the wall, every corner, like impossible to miss them. Right? So this is a very easy thing. And, you know, they go through everybody and they get to me, and I literally froze. Like, I had to make something up on the spot. And it's the moment for me, it was a really important moment for me, because just not 2 years prior to that, I was actually going through a therapeutic retreat myself with my ex-wife. And at the end of that retreat, you know, this is in the middle of all the speaking, I wasn't healthy back then. You know, I still had a long way to go in the healing process and didn't know it. But the lead therapist at the end of that retreat came up to me. She said, "So how'd it go?" And I was like, you know, look, I don't think I'll ever be happy again, and I'm okay with that. You know, this is all bonus time for me anyway. You know, if I was brought back here to carry this message and impact other people, I'm fine with that. But happiness is something that's like foreign to me, and I'm good. And she looked at me and she said, "You know, someday I think you'll realize that loving yourself is the most important thing when it comes to finding true happiness," you know. And I looked at her right then, and I wasn't defensive, but I said, "You know, I can understand intellectually what you're telling me. Like, I believe that you are right, but I can't internalize that. You know, I was raised on the principle of selfless service and sacrifice and service to others, and then that was reinforced by a military career. Like, there's nothing more foreign that you could tell me than love myself."
Seems almost selfish to a degree.
Right? What I learned a couple years later at this group process, it dawned on me that I think I was just interpreting that statement the wrong way. Right? That it's not an issue of loving yourself. It's an issue of giving yourself the opportunity of at least acknowledging the true emotions that you're experiencing in any given situation.
Yes.
Because if I acknowledge it, and I'm at least cognizant of it, that puts me back in control of myself, right? What I had been on for the last decade was automatic suppression mode of my emotions. They were controlling me. I wasn't in control, right? So that was a definitive moment in my healing process. It took a very long time to get there, but I challenge anyone listening to this, ask yourself that question. How do you feel? How do you feel? You know, and if you struggle to answer that, there's probably a little bit of work to do, and we can help tie you to resources to get that done.
Oh man. Yes. When we get back, we will talk about Beauty of a Darker Soul, your book.
Right on.
This is the Veterans Take Charge radio show.
Hi, registered pharmacist Ben Fuchs here. I've been studying healthy bodies for 35 years, and what I've got to tell you may shock and surprise you, but if you listen up, it may change your life. Our world is lit and energized from the light released from the sun in the form of waves, two of which are known as UVA and UVB, and are invisible and associated with the aging, dangerous, and sometimes deadly effects conventionally attributed to solar radiation. UVA waves are linked to damage in the lower levels of the skin and can show up as wrinkles, fine lines, and other indicators of photo damage. Solar rays of UVA length can penetrate through glass windows and remain constant all year long, making them a troublesome source of skin aging January through December. The other solar wave, UVB, is the cause of sunburning, skin redness, and eye damage. On a positive note, UVB is responsible for converting cholesterol, found in considerable quantities in the skin, into vitamin D. Most chemical sunscreening ingredients block UVB, a couple will block UVA, but the only way to get truly broad-spectrum sun protection from all rays is to use zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, which act to reflect all the sun rays, including UVA and UVB, refracting them in their crystalline structure like a reflection in a mirror. And as far as overall sun safety goes, don't be misled by SPF, which is only an indicator of UVB protection and provides no information about shielding from UVA. That means that SPF is only a measurement of how well a product can help prevent sunburns and not an indicator of protection from wrinkles, skin aging, or cancer. Pharmacist Ben here, urging you to go to kscohealth.com to order Beyond Tangy Tangerine, the Healthy Start Pack, and other nutritional supplements that I personally use and recommend. You can purchase these premium quality products at wholesale prices online at kscohealth.com. That's kscohealth.com. I'm a pharmacist that believes that staying healthy and strong is not only about medicine, it's about giving your body the raw materials it needs to do its work. Go to kscohealth.com. Make sure you check out the cool videos too at kscohealth.com. That's kscohealth.com.
This is the Veterans Take Charge radio show. We're in studio with former Army Major Josh Montz. High five,
brother. All right.
Oh, man. So you, in the last 10 years, you have gone through some tremendous ups and downs, a lot of which at the time were unbeknownst to you, things you were dealing with internally, things that you, the microscopic traumas that people just don't really recognize, people don't really see. But you had the opportunity, the chance to really look inward and introspectively get to know these things, identify these things. And all of this ultimately led to Beauty of a Darker Soul. Right?
Sure did.
Talk to us about what led to, well, I mean, we already talked about what led to the book.
Yeah.
What was the defining factor where you're like, you know what, I'm going to write a book and this is going to be it. And what is the book? Yeah, go with that and we'll go from there.
You know, I had, after I gave a TED Talk last year, right?
You did a TED Talk too?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you another high five, man.
No, it was, there was a TED Talk last year and, got to know a lot of great people because of that. And one guy was really fluent in terms of book writing and he gave me some great advice. He said, Josh, you shouldn't write a book because you want to write a book. You should write a book because you feel like you have to. And
that kind of puts a different spin on it.
Yeah, that is the period of my life that I was in. I reached this point where I felt I had to. You know, I could communicate what we're talking about right now in a 3 or 4 hour conversation with somebody one-on-one. But what the challenge was is how do I take these deep emotional voids? How do you truly explain shame? You know, how do you explain what shame feels like, what guilt feels like, in a way that will be positive and productive to people,
When people hear those things,
of any walk of life, right?
Kind of a negative connotation,
right? And it's so I wrote it because I had to. I've had people, very well-respected people push me to write a book for a long time, but I didn't want it just to be another war story. People think dying's awesome and they're attracted. I can see that, right? But what do you get out of that besides, right? So I wanted to leverage that for a greater purpose, and that's really how the book was established. And the book kind of takes its own. It does go through in great detail of the near-death experience and the events leading up to that. Through say the first 6 chapters or so. But then the rest of the book, it goes into the 10-year emotional journey afterwards. And
because really your story is not about the sniper fire. Your story is about the second life.
It's not the least of it's the sniper fire.
Yeah.
And that's the point, if sometimes it does kind of hit people when I say, dying was not the worst thing I've ever been through, not even close. In fact, it was a positive experience. What was, and that's the point. Trauma is not always what it seems. Mm-hmm. It's the microscopic details that are within it or that surround the experience or other experiences. I've had Crohn's disease for 12 years. That's actually what took me out of the military.
We totally forgot to talk about that.
I mean, the point is, even if you don't know what Crohn's is, right? It's an incurable immune disorder. And it's under control now, which is all great. But I'll tell you this much. I would rather get shot 10 times over, even at the risk of dying, than live with an incurable disease. So
say that again, please. People need to hear that.
I would rather get shot 10 times over, even at the risk of dying, than living with an incurable disease. When you lose your health, you lose everything.
Oh.
And that is trauma.
Preach.
Right? And what do we talk about when we talk trauma? A traumatic experience is something that fundamentally alters the way you believe the world should work. Right? So, and again, just to highlight this, and this is a very personal thing for me. Some of you may have been through other experiences and had a different reaction, right? But for me, it's like I walked into that situation in Baghdad, that sniper situation, knowing that something like that could happen. I was trained for it. I was prepared for it. If you look at it through the lens of moral wounds like shame and powerlessness and betrayal, like none of those elements were really there, right? But they certainly were there in events that preceded that, and events that came afterwards. So whatever experiences you've had in your life, and I'll say this again because it's so important, resist the urge to try to compare with other people and with other experiences. Trauma, it doesn't discriminate, and while you may compare your experiences with others, I assure you that trauma does not. Shame, guilt, betrayal, those are universal things, right? And although the nature of our experiences can differ greatly person to person, the things that manifest from them are often very similar, and it's usually the root causes grounded in those emotions. I mean, shame is the master emotion. and it's, but I'll tell you this, it has a weakness, and that weakness is empathy, and it's human connection.
That's important.
We, like and I was just as guilty of this as anyone. Like, I and again, this is another intricacy that I think is just out there, right? I don't think most people try to suppress, Like, I never tried to suppress. I didn't care. Like, you could put me on national TV and I'll do a behavioral health session with a therapist right now. I don't care about that. When people walk through the doors of a clinician's office, they want one thing. They're looking for inner peace. They're looking for a perspective that can help them. Most of the soldiers that I've encountered, they don't care if the person deployed or not. All they care is that that therapist genuinely cares about them, right? So
yes.
But the problem is the feelings that they're experiencing, the voids that are dominating their lives, are our lives, right? Are often so complex that they are almost impossible to put into words, right? Until there's a catastrophic event that, hopefully the person survives, that leads to a new perspective on the situation, right? So a lot of what came to this, a lot of this journey was introspection. It was self-discovery, but make no mistake about it, I would not be here today without the people that surrounded me.
I hear that.
And that is the most important thing.
Definitely.
This is at every moment in my life, in the deepest throes of my depression, even at the points when I adamantly believed that no one could possibly understand, there was always someone in my life who proved me wrong. Every time. Couldn't see it then. I can see every one of those instances now in retrospect.
Right. Hey, you down to take a couple of phone calls?
Yeah, let's do it.
Outstanding. Let's bring Colonel Terry on the line. Colonel Terry, we haven't heard from you in a bit. It is good to have you back.
Gentlemen, good. I do listen to you, but don't always call in.
I'm glad you listen.
Calling in now because I want to compliment your guest. What is the title of his book, and how can I get a copy?
Well, hey, Colonel Terry, if you the book is, we think we're going to be publishing in August, so it's not quite out yet. But if you go to the website www.darkersouls.com. You can sign up on that website, and I'm going to send an email blast out when the book's available for pre-order.
Currently, right now, I believe it's at the Pentagon for final evaluation.
It's doing the standard pre-publication review, so we should be wrapping that up here pretty soon. I don't anticipate any problems, but right now, realistically, it looks like August. And I should mention too that I am dedicating 100% of the profits for all pre-orders and sales that occur during the first week to a group called the Integrated Recovery Foundation in Southern California, Ron Gellis's organization.
Oh, we're going to get Ron Gellis. We're going to get him on July 2nd.
He's going to be the next guest. But Ron's actually the oldest active competitor at the CrossFit Games. Awesome person, but he is establishing a therapeutic retreat center for women who were sexually assaulted while on military service. huge need out there, and he's developed a phenomenal nonprofit that will help deliver treatment to those people. And I'm doing my best to help him out. So just know if you do pick up a copy, between now and then, that's where those funds will be going.
All right, so, well, obviously the Veterans in Charge guys should announce that when the book's available. And you guys, Jason, you should send out a scatter email to everybody in your email package, I think, appropriately.
We'll push it out on all platforms possible.
Understood. Look, I wanted to call in and say, I learned that the least fun you'll ever have in life is being shot at in combat. And the other thing I wanted to share is Stephen Hawking. You know Stephen Hawking, the
Sure do.
famous physicist who's paralyzed from a disease and who's, if you will, told us a lot more about our universe than Einstein.
I sure do.
Or Stephen Hawking, and what he obviously had to overcome. Well, I met him at a reception, and someone insulted him, a 14-year-old son that a physicist had snuck into this small reception. That's the small part. Everybody was aghast. The kid said to Stephen Hawking, "Doesn't it make you mad at God or whatever that makes you so crippled?" Can you imagine that?
Right.
And all of us dropped our mouths, about 16 of us there. Hawking did not. I'm looking right at him.
Doesn't
He
surprise me.
smiled in his way and said through his device to this kid, I've learned in this life's journey long ago that anger is a very poor use of my time.
Right.
Beautiful.
Right
Okay,
on.
isn't that incredible wisdom from a bona fide genius?
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, the same is true. Billy Sunshine's a guy, left-wing loony, who calls in to this station, and he insults veterans. He's done it several times, but he insulted Vietnam veterans especially, which is my era.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have fragged his officers, ho, 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 and he was too smart to get drafted. Coward. He wouldn't have defended the country if the Russians were attacking us. More importantly, though, the guilt that my era had and kids now are having, it's completely unjustified because, as I've explained, we went when our country asked us to go. Our country said this is important to engage in this conflict. And in fact, the North Vietnamese communists invaded the South Vietnamese against the treaty that the North Vietnamese signed. Let's recognize that reality. And we were asked to defend those people, and no one owes anybody an apology for, if you will, doing what your country asked you to do for a cause that we described as noble. And even more so now, fighting the Islamic extremists, jihadis. Again, it's a noble undertaking. It's a noble cause. And I wish you every recovery. And as I say, and lastly, I'll share that the Dalai Lama shared with me in a conversation when I brought up everything universally perpetual, and he said, nothing is permanent.
Right.
Not pain, not suffering, not even a marriage. Okay? So, again, I hope that's helpful to look at the big perspective. And by the way, I compliment the obvious wisdom that you're sharing, both in your book and your participation today.
Hey, thank you, sir. That's a great call right there.
Thanks, Colonel Terry.
I'll share with you this real quick. There's something I talk about in the guilt on the larger strategic scale, if you will, like you're mentioning, is what I've kind of found is the guilt that I'm referring to tends to be a little more personal, one-on-one, to the people that you're directly supporting in that environment. What happened to that teenager who I was partnered with so closely, after I left a year later. It's just that there's things like that. It's normal. It takes time to process and derive meaning from it. And to kind of cap that out, I'll share you there's a quote that I absolutely love by Dr. Viktor Frankl, who is a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist.
Wow.
And he said that without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete. And his ability to derive meaning, and that's what we're talking about here, regardless of your walk of life, right? It's all of us will endure suffering. We need each other to heal, which is why it's so critical to bridge these gaps. Because these feelings, once you have felt shame, right? You have walked the same battlefields that I have. Once you have felt guilt, you have walked the same path in life that I have, right? I don't care what your profession is or what you're doing, right? So all of us experience suffering. It's our ability to derive meaning from it that really indicates a true healing process has occurred.
Oh, real quick, let's get Tony. Tony, we've got about like literally 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Have him contact Joe Wallach of Longevity. He can cure his Crohn's disease in 3 months of good nutrition.
We'll get you that contact information.
We're directly related to Dr. Wallach, Colonel Wallach. We will plug him in.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Veterans Take Charge radio show. We've been in studio with former infantry officer Joshua Montz. Go check out www.darkersouls.com. Pre-order the book. It's going to shed some very good light for you, but it's also going directly to helping veterans in a very monumental way. Be aware, next week we're going to have on Carmelo Rodriguez, who the VA has declared dead in October. He's very much alive.
But he's going to be on our show.
He's very much alive, but he's still fighting to get his name resurrected, which is freaking crazy. So
throw the website out.
Which website? Darkersouls.com.
Darkersouls.com.
Josh, man, thank you very much for being
here. Find beauty within the darkness together.
Yes. Beauty of a Darker Soul. That is the book. Go pre-order it right now at www.darkersouls.com. Final words?
Hey, thanks so much for having me here. It's always great to be in Santa Cruz, guys.
We are Veterans Take Charge.
KSCO, Santa Cruz.
CBS News, I'm Jim Taylor. Ransomware starts a new work week Monday around the world. In London, CBS's Larry Miller says all the UK bracing for the return of the cyber attack that crippled that country's health services.
The hackers who attacked more than 200,000 victims in at least 150 countries with ransomware are at it again, reports Rob Wainwright, head of the crime agency Europol.
The slowdown of the infection rate over Friday night, after a temporary fix around it, has now been overcome by a second variation that the criminals have released. So the numbers are going up.
Wainwright warns organizations to ensure they've updated operating systems and applied patches before turning on their computers tomorrow morning. Larry Miller, CBS News, London.
The malware created by the U.S. government. Microsoft President, Chief Legal Officer Brad Smith compares the theft of NSA exploits to the theft of missiles from the American military. Just into CBS News, North Korea says the medium long-range strategic missile it tested over the weekend capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. CBS's Adriana Diaz reports from Beijing.
According to U.S. intelligence, the medium-range missile, classified as a KN-17, was launched near North Korea's west coast. Japan's military says it reached an altitude of more than 1,200 miles before splashing down into the Sea of Japan. A U.S. official tells Reuters it landed about 60 miles off the coast of Russia. It was the first successful test after a string of recent failures.
Finding a successor to fired FBI Director James Comey.
It's going to be critical that they name someone very solid for this position, because in the wake of this Comey firing, there's so much distrust among a lot of different factions, not just within the Democratic Party for the president, that I think he needs to establish that this is going to be a quality pick.
On CBS Face the Nation, that's Ben Dominick, publisher of The Federalist. On CNN, Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer on his request of the Inspector General.
I have asked the Inspector General, and the request I've made is not only to look into any interference to thwart the investigation, but whether Attorney General Sessions should have participated in the firing of Comey.
Torch-lit rallies in Charlottesville, Virginia.
We will not stand for this kind of despicable behavior.
Charlottesville Mayor Mike Signer on an event that has once again thrust his city into the national spotlight. White nationalist Richard Spencer held a daylight rally at the city's Stonewall Jackson statue, but it's a nighttime march to the Robert E. Lee statue that sent shockwaves through the community.
You know, burning torches in a public park that was reminiscent to me and I think a lot of other people of the tactics that you saw with the KKK. I think that it was meant to inspire fear and even terror in our vulnerable populations.
Signer, who is Jewish, says his own Twitter feed is now littered with anti-Semitism, but he won't let it stop him from keeping hate from his city. Dory Zook for CBS News, Charlottesville.
This is CBS News.
After all the sleep you cost your mom through the years, it's time to give it all back. I'm Scott Tannen, founder of Boll & Branch. This Mother's Day, give your mom the gift she deserves, great sleep on Boll & Branch sheets. Our sheets are handcrafted from 100% organic cotton. They get softer over time. We guarantee she'll love them. She can try them risk-free for 30 nights. Now through Mother's Day, get $50 off your first set plus free shipping at bollandbranch.com, promo code SLEEP. That's bollandbranch.com, promo code SLEEP.
Wouldn't it be great if you could stop crime before it happens? With the Ring Floodlight Cam, you can. I'm Jamie Siminoff, inventor and founder of Ring. Floodlight Cam is a motion-activated HD security camera that connects right to your phone, so you're alerted when anyone steps onto your property. You can now see, speak, or even sound an alarm right from your phone, anywhere, anytime. Does your floodlight prevent crime? Ours does. Go to ring.com/advantage and save $150 off of a Ring of Security kit. That's ring.com/advantage.
From San Jose to Salinas, Red Hot News Talk, AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz.
Good evening, you're listening to KSCO Santa Cruz, KOMY Watsonville, KSCO.com, ZBSradio.com. 6:05, time for your traffic, 17 northbound. Crawling from Scotts Valley all the way to Los Gatos 101, heavy northbound from the 156. Cut off towards Hollister all the way up to Morgan Hill. 156 heavy as well in that eastbound direction, coming out of Castroville and also closer to Hollister. Northbound 1, heavy at Moss Landing. Otherwise, roadways are looking good. Weather tonight, partly cloudy at low near 49. Cloudy skies tomorrow morning. Sunny in the afternoon, a high near 65 for tomorrow. Looks like no rain in the forecast, and it's 6:06. Time for Golden Age of Radio, double episodes of Dragnet on KSCO Santa Cruz.
Dragnet, the documented drama of an actual crime. For the next 30 minutes, in cooperation with the Los Angeles Police Department, you will travel step by step on the side of the law through an actual case transcribed from official police files. From beginning to end, from crime to punishment, Dragnet is the story of your police force in action.
It was Wednesday, October 3rd. It was warm in Los Angeles. We were working the day watch out of Juvenile Division. My partner is Frank Smith. The boss is Captain Stein. My name's Friday. It was 1:47 p.m. when we got to Adams High School.